Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Cunningham, and I am a doctoral trainee with Fire Igniting Life Psychology here in San Diego. Today, I will be doing a little primer on acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a branch off of cognitive behavioral therapy, which was discussed in the last Mental Health Friday. So, just a brief little introduction about myself. I have a bachelor's degree from the University of California in San Diego. I received my bachelor's of science in physiology and neuroscience with a minor in psychology. I then went on to get my master's degree at Grand Canyon University. I have a master's of science in psychology with an emphasis in forensic psychology. I'm a current doctoral student at Alliant International University and a doctoral trainee at Fire Igniting Lives Psychology. Outside of school and work and all that jazz, I love to spend time with my three dogs. The one on the top there is my dog Martha May. She's a rat terrier. The one in the middle is Charles. He is a Pomeranian. And then the one on the bottom is Henry, and he is a Chiweenie. So, just acknowledging some things about spring before we get into more about acceptance and commitment therapy. So, as we transition into the springtime season, it's good to kind of reflect on what exactly is meant by that. So, just the bare bones definition of spring is the season between winter and summer in which the temperature gradually starts to rise. That's a pretty boring definition if you ask me, but that's the really technical definition of spring. Um, Culturally, spring is celebrated as a symbol of food and prosperity, so planting new crops, fertility, and all that kind of stuff, and then also just new growth and arising from a dormant winter. So, in other places, we're lucky in San Diego, we are blessed with our weather, but in other places, coming out of this almost oppressive cold. So, what is acceptance and commitment therapy? Acceptance and commitment therapy was founded in 1982 by Stephen Hayes. Like I mentioned before, it's an off branch of cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's based on the underlying assumption that pain, grief, disappointment, illness, and anxiety are inevitable features of human life, which definitely sounds a little bit depressing or sad at first, but when you think about it, um, kind of what they're getting at there is this quest to only ever feel positive emotions or have positive experiences in and of itself can be negative. Just because there are these things in our life that we might not necessarily be able to control, and these negative emotions or reactions or uncomfortable situations that we might find ourselves in just as an inevitable part of our life. So ACT focuses on noticing, accepting, and embracing all thoughts and emotions, and it incorporates this concept of mindfulness that we learned about a few Mental Health Fridays ago. But yeah, just really noticing, accepting, and embracing those thoughts and emotions versus trying to um, challenge them or fight with them. So, just some aims of ACT. So, it aims to help individuals adapt to challenges through this concept of psychological flexibility. And what that is basically is just a fancy way of saying that you're able to recognize and adapt to various situational demands. So, being able to recognize and adapt in both negative situations or positive situations, shifting mindsets or behaviors, being aware, open, and committed to behaviors consistent with values. So later on in the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about values. Acceptance and commitment therapy is very values-based, meaning that um, there is this assumption that a lot of stress in people's life comes from the discord between living a life that's not aligned with your values. And then not eliminating or suppressing negative experience, rather just letting it happen and experiencing it as it comes. So ACT broken down, there's six main components of ACT, and I'll go through and describe every single one of these six components and kind of give you little techniques or tricks that are associated with each of these levels of ACT. So there's cognitive diffusion, acceptance, contact with the present, the observing self, values, and committed action. So first, let's talk a little bit about cognitive diffusion. So this is really just a fancy way of saying that you're taking a step back from your thoughts and beliefs without getting caught up in them. So allowing yourself some distance from your thoughts, and really honing into this idea that a thought is just a thought. So there's a couple of tricks that you can try. There's the I'm having the thought that, and then also leaves floating on a river. So the first one, that I'm having the thought that. So identifying your thought, adding the phrase I'm having the thought that, and then just observing the distance now that has been created between you and your thought. So a potential thought could be I'm a failure. And then you would add the phrase I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. And then just observing that distance that you've now put between yourself and that thought. Um, Sometimes I even like to take this a little bit like one step further, and instead of just saying I'm a failure, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure, going a step further and saying my brain is telling me that I am a failure, or I am noticing that I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. So really like putting that distance between that negative thought that has come into your mind and just being able to observe it as it is and how it has come in to your mind. The next exercise that I want to try is called Leaves on a Stream. So just like a basic overview, and then I'll run through kind of a more guided observation of it. So you're going to want to imagine that you're resting by the side of the stream. The focus is going to be on the stream and the peacefulness of the stream. And then when distractions enter into your mind, taking a moment to notice them without judgment, and then returning your attention to the stream, and then placing that thought on a leaf, and then placing that leaf in the water and letting it float down the stream until it disappears, and then continue visualizing the stream. So we'll go ahead and we'll walk through this exercise. If you want to take a moment, this is best done in kind of a quiet place where you can fully reflect on your thoughts. But just for the purposes of this presentation, if you just wanted to take a moment to go ahead and close your eyes, and I'll walk you through this. So during the Leaves on a Stream exercise, you will visualize yourself resting near stream. Whenever thoughts enter your mind, you will imagine placing them atop a leaf and watching as they float away. Instead of seeing the world from inside your thoughts, you will take a step back and view them from afar. By doing so, you will gain perspective on your thoughts and feelings, effectively reducing their power. So, as I said, this is best done in a quiet place free of distraction. You'll want to sit down or lie down in a comfortable position, and then close your eyes or let your gaze soften, and then begin taking slow, deep breaths. So, the first part, imagine you are resting by the side of a stream. The scene can look however you like. Use all of your senses to imagine what the stream and its surroundings look like: the sound of the water and other ambience, the physical sensations, and anything else that comes to mind. Your objective during this exercise is simply to focus on the stream. When distractions enter your mind, such as thoughts or feelings, take a moment to notice them without judgment. For example, if you are distracted by other obligations, notice and acknowledge to yourself, I am thinking about my to-do list. After taking a moment to observe a thought or feeling, return your attention to the stream. Place your thought upon a leaf. You might imagine writing the thought of the leaf or attaching it in some other way. Place the leaf in the water and watch it float down the stream until it disappears. Continue visualizing the stream, simply observing and releasing any thoughts that enter your mind. There is nothing else that you need to do right now. I'm just going to give you a moment to sit in that and continue imagining your stream and your thoughts as they come. So when you do this exercise on your own, some people find it really helpful to set a timer. So some people tend to do like 10 to 15 minutes, and then the timer just lets them know when the practice ends so that um, you're exercising some intention and some mindfulness in that moment about how long you want to focus on this exercise. So, some notes on this exercise as well is that you want to treat all of your thoughts and feelings the same. So, whether they're comfortable thoughts, uncomfortable thoughts, or really neutral thoughts, the goal is to become aware of your experience, not necessarily to change it or to improve it, just noticing those thoughts. So, with regular practice, the leaves on the stream exercise becomes easier and its positive effects become more powerful. The next component of ACT is acceptance. So, this is the idea of making room for unpleasant thoughts and feelings or these uncomfortable versus comfortable emotions. So, not giving them too much attention and also not struggling with them too much. So, not combating them, not fighting them, rather just letting them exist as they exist. So, one of the techniques is this is more of a metaphor, not necessarily like a practice that you can practice, but I think it's a helpful metaphor to remind myself of personally when I'm struggling with my emotions or trying to fight my emotions. And it is the metaphor of the Chinese finger trap. So, I don't know if you've ever played this game as a child or maybe even as an adult, but the Chinese finger trap, basically you put your two fingers into it and then you have to try and get the finger trap off of your fingers. And yeah, so we'll walk through that a little bit. So imagine that you've put both of your fingers in a Chinese finger trap. So as you pull the trap, it makes it tighter. I don't know if anyone has ever had that experience where you're like a kid and you're like freaking out a little bit because you're like trying to pull the finger trap apart and it just keeps getting tighter and it keeps squeezing your fingers. And then eventually you realize that the only way to get out of that situation is to relax and gently push your fingers together. So it's kind of this um, idea of the more that we struggle, resist, or fight, the more that you become entangled and trapped. And so it's kind of this metaphor for suffering. So accepting your emotions and thoughts without judgment or attempts to change them often alleviates your suffering or distress. So instead of trying to pull your fingers apart and really fighting with those emotions that are coming in, those thoughts that are coming in, rather if you lean into them and push them together and do kind of the opposite, you will feel better over time. So I just think that's a really cool little metaphor to remind myself of when I'm struggling with an uncomfortable emotion. So contact with the present moment is another useful technique that you can use for acceptance and commitment therapy. So basically, what that means is bringing just a full awareness to the here and now. So a lot of the time, it's really easy for us to get caught up in our thoughts and our emotions and everything that we have to do with the day. Things just start really distracting us, and it can be hard to just focus on what you're doing in the here and now and really be present with yourself, be present with your mind, and be present with your body. So a technique for this is mindfulness. Like I explained a couple Mental Health Fridays ago, there was a really great in-depth presentation on mindfulness. So I won't go too in-depth, but I will give you one of my favorite techniques for mindfulness. And before I get into that, just a quick note on mindfulness. So, mindfulness in general is being aware and present of your experiences. So overall, research has found that mindfulness enhances your awareness of your surroundings, your awareness of yourself. It reduces stress over time. It improves your ability to focus and remain on task. And it deepens your connections with yourself and your environment. It boosts your creativity, which I thought was interesting. And then they have actually found biological um, cool things biologically about mindfulness, such as strengthening your neural connections. So, one of my favorite techniques to do with the mindfulness is the five senses. So, just going over a brief overview of what that is that you start by noticing five things that you can see. Next, you move into four things that you can feel. You listen for three things that you can hear, and then you notice two things that you can smell, and then you notice one thing that you can taste. And so this exercise really helps you to ground yourself in the present moment and sometimes helps to eliminate some of those overwhelming distractions or maybe uncomfortable thoughts that come in. So I'll walk you through this exercise a little bit as well and give a brief introduction. So every day we're surrounded by countless sights, sounds, and smells. Unfortunately, our brains are often so focused on thoughts or worries that we miss important things that are right in front of us. Mindfulness helps us to slow down and approach our surroundings, which keeps us grounded in the here and now. In this exercise, the goal is to notice what's around you. So this is a mindfulness exercise focused on your environment. So again, similarly to leaves on a stream, this activity can be done while seated quietly inside, or it can also be done when you're like outside walking or sitting outside. Focusing on one sense at a time, you'll pay attention to everything that you can see, feel, hear, smell, and taste. So we'll also take a moment to pause in between each of the senses, just so that you can take a moment to fully be mindful about that sense. So, first, I want you to start by noticing five things that you can see. Try to find something you've never noticed before. It could be an object, the color of something, a pattern, or anything else. It could be on you or your clothes, or it could be off in the distance. Next, I want you to notice four things you can feel. This could be your clothes on your skin or something your hands can reach out and touch. Maybe something is rough, maybe something is smooth. Now listen for three things you can hear. The sound might be very, very quiet, but if you pay attention, you can hear it. You might hear your own breathing or your stomach rumbling, or you might hear something off in the distance. Now notice two things that you can smell. It's okay if it's not your favorite smell. Finally, notice one thing you can taste. If you're having trouble tasting anything, try to think about the last thing you ate. Maybe you can almost taste it. All right, great. So once you finish with that exercise, I find it helpful to kind of take a moment to reflect, maybe about how things are feeling in your body. Maybe you notice that your thoughts have become less intrusive. Maybe your thoughts have slowed down. Maybe you don't feel as uncomfortable anymore. So really just taking a moment to appreciate the exercise and to be present in the moment. So the next component of acceptance and commitment therapy is the observing self. So this one's a little bit tricky. There's not really like a trick or a technique for it per se. It's really this idea that you're not your thoughts and feelings. So putting again that distance between your thoughts and feelings, and similar to that thought exercise that we did earlier, just really recognizing your process of thinking and then the process of then in turn observing that thinking. So this one's a little bit more, definitely a little bit more tricky to get a hang of there. Um, but definitely it's really just this process of like thinking about thinking. So acknowledging what's going on in your mind without necessarily being wrapped up or consumed by those thoughts. And then putting the distance between those thoughts. So you can label the thoughts of like instead of I'm not good enough, saying I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough, or I am noticing the thought that I am not good enough. Or like I said again, my brain is telling me that I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough. So really like allowing yourself to take this distance between what comes into your thoughts and then yourself. So really just observing that process. So also another core part and core component of ACT is values. So this is one of my favorite parts of ACT. I really love it, and I really love being able to tap into things that are meaningful for me in my life. And then also kind of trying to understand how I might be having or running into situations that don't necessarily align with my values. And then that's where like sometimes the source of discomfort or uncomfortable feelings can come from. So, values, just as a broad overview, because I know that word means a lot of things, is that they're just considered to be core aspects of your life that give meaning and purpose. So, they're not necessarily goals. So, it's not like, oh, I want to be this, or I want to be accomplished, or I want to be successful, or things like that. It's things that you inherently value and just give you a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose as you are right now. So they can help provide direction in life. So moving towards your values versus moving away from your values. And they can evolve and change over time, although they do tend to stay pretty stagnant once you like reach adulthood. They do tend to change over time. You start to value other things in your life, things that may have not been as important in the past are more important, and then just kind of coming with this to terms with this idea of that your values can actually change and evolve over time. So one of my favorite techniques to do with people for this is the values exercise. So we're going to do that in the next slide here. So here I've listed out some values. This is not a comprehensive list of values. This is just some that tend to come to people's minds right away. So we have relaxation, adventure, stability, friendship, status, honesty, happiness, fairness, excitement, wealth, loyalty, love, humor, faith, and knowledge. So I'm going to give you just like a minute or two here to kind of think about what your top 8 values would be from this list of values. So the 8 things that provide you the most meaning and purpose in your life as it is right now, not necessarily things that you want to be, things that apply to you. Correct. All right. Hopefully you've been able to identify your 8 or the 8 that seem most important to you right in this moment. I'm going to make it a little bit more challenging for you, and I want you to get rid of 3 of those values. So choose your top 5 values. So really take a moment to think about what 3 um, are maybe ones that aren't as pertinent or as purposeful to you or meaningful to you right now in your life, and really focusing in on those 5 um, core values. All right, now that you have your five identified, we're going to continue to make it a little bit more tricky, and I want you to get rid of two of those five. So just your top three values. So the three things that are the most meaningful or purposeful to you right now in your life. And when you're doing this, think about the two that you're deciding to get rid of out of your top values, and then the three that you're deciding to keep. All right, so now that you have your three values identified, I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to make it more difficult for you. So we'll leave it at your top three values. So just take a moment to reflect. Reflect on why you chose those three values, or where you see them the most in your life, or where you see them providing the most meaning and purpose. And just really taking a moment to appreciate those values that you've selected. Do you feel like your life currently aligns with those values? Do you find yourself ever in situations where those values are challenged? Do you find situations where those values are really nurtured and are able to flourish? So, really just thinking about that. Um, I did want to say that, I personally have a little bit of trouble narrowing down my values at times when I'm just given a list of values like this. So I did want to say that there are definitely like exercises that you can do online if you have access to the internet and all that kind of stuff that are called values sorting cards. And so basically, they'll put up two different values and have you choose between the two values and click through. And it takes usually 5 to 10 minutes, and then it'll actually give you this cool little results page that tells you like your top five values and all that kind of jazz, and like what they mean and what that might look like for you in your life. And then it also provides the opportunity to reflect on if you consider that value, like their description of that value, to be your description of that value, because I think that these are very personal things, and can have different definitions and different meanings for different people. So the last part of ACT is this idea of committed action. So once you've learned all of these things about yourself, um, really committing to taking this action to live a life aligned with your values. Yeah. Once you've identified them and you can pick them out and you can identify what parts of your life may be aligning with them and what parts of your life might not be, it's really a lot easier to take action to make effective change in your life and continue to try and seek a life that is fully aligned with your values. So overall, I just wanted to say great job if you've stuck with me all the way through this. Acceptance and commitment is definitely a process that can take a lot of time and practice. It sounds really great on the surface, but I definitely acknowledge that it takes a lot of time to be able to really sit in uncomfortable feelings and uncomfortable emotions and really let yourself feel them and embrace them as they are, not judge or challenge or combat them. Um, and hopefully, these skills will help you to come to peace with your emotions. So, just being able to recognize and allow your emotions to exist, like I said, versus trying to struggle or challenge with them. This is just some references that I had, and then any questions? Okay, so if there are no questions, I'm just going to go back through and just real quick run through the different exercises that we went through so that you can have them fresh on your mind. So we went over the I'm having the thought exercise, so identifying your thought, adding the phrase I'm having the thought, and then observing the distance that you've now created between your thought, the phrase, and the feeling that comes with the thought. The Leaves on the Stream exercise, which focused on kind of visualizing your thoughts as leaves on a stream and just allowing them to exist and float by you. The Chinese finger trap metaphor, so that being the more that you struggle or resist or fight, the harder that it is actually to overcome uncomfortable um, emotions, suffering, or distress. Some mindfulness stuff that we went over. So the five senses, so noticing things you can see, feel, hear, smell, and taste. To really let yourself be grounded in the environment in the present moment. The values exercise, so definitely recommend going and finding one of those values card sorters if you have a hard time pinning down exactly what your values are. Those can provide a lot of useful insight. And that's it.